Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alex Jackman from the Royal Geographical Society with IBG, the RGS. I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar on career opportunities opened up by studying and using geography. Today, the session is on careers in international development. I'm really excited to welcome our panelists, who've all been geography students themselves, and who'll be able to share their different paths, perspectives, and advice with you this afternoon. I'm joined with John Stone of the FCDO, Cara Treasure, Fundraising and Communications Manager at PumpAid, and Catherine Vincent, Director of Kalima Integrated Development Solutions. Over the next 45 minutes or so, they'll be sharing their insights, advice, and guidance on starting a career in international development. Just some housekeeping first. If you have any questions for the panel, just drop them into the Slido at the bottom of the streaming page, and our team will. And we'll round up a recording of the webinar, as well as some careers advice and links, and send these to you by email afterwards. If you didn't sign up, don't worry, you can find our sector careers resource for international development, our other sector careers resources and recordings on our website. So to start, I'd just like to invite our panelists to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their background, their career to date, and what their role involves at the moment. So we start with John.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's John Stone. I work at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, which is a newly merged government department between the Department for International Development and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, with its new snappy title. So I have been there for a few years, and before then I worked at an NGO. And this might sound like a bit of a disclaimer, but I actually started off as a geologist and then sort of saw reason and slowly became a geographer through kind of postdoctoral studies and things like that. I've worked in a variety of fields. I suppose in the civil service I'd be called a generalist, but I work mostly in international development, some foreign relations, international security, and I've worked also in the Cabinet Office on kind of UK emergency management, including one of the things that I worked on was preparing for pandemics, but that was a few years ago now. And yes, well, things have turned out where we are. It's great to speak to you all today and look forward to some of the questions as they come in.
Should we go to Cara?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name's Cara, and as Alex said, I'm the Fundraising and Communications Manager at PumpAid. So in terms of a background, I always loved geography at school, so definitely speaking to the right audience. Loved it, and so it made a lot of sense to then go on to study it. So I did my bachelor's in human geography and planning, and then a master's in poverty and development. I then went on to do a couple of internships at international development organisations, Farm Africa and PumpAid, and then I went on to work at the British Red Cross, predominantly in UK crisis response, so responding to all emergencies in the UK, so including 2017, so Grenfell, Manchester, London Bridge, and all of the events that happened. I then went on to develop recovery and resilience strategies, so particularly for supporting people after emergencies in the UK, once the initial response has happened, the ongoing recovery process, and that was amazing. And then went on to develop wider strategy for the whole of the Red Cross, and then went back to PumpAid and love my job now. So I look after all of the fundraising, so everything from individuals, major donors, trusts, corporates, so all fundraising types, and also the communication, so everything in terms of digital reporting, yeah, and it's just brilliant. So our programs are all in Malawi, and it's all water and sanitation, but deliberately really promoting self-reliance and independence and a view to ending aid dependency. So yeah, it's great to be here today, and looking forward to answering your questions.
Catherine.
Good afternoon, everyone. Really nice to be here. As Cara said, I also can talk about geography all day long and have always loved it. So yeah, really nice to be here. So my name's Catherine Vincent. I'm from Kalima Integrated Development Solutions, which is a specialist climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction consultancy based in South Africa. We work in the fields of climate adaptation, climate services. We undertake a lot of transdisciplinary partnerships, bringing together different actors to produce new forms of usable knowledge to reduce the risks that climate poses. And our vision is to secure equitable and sustainable development, particularly in Africa, but also further afield as well. So how did I get here? Well, as I said, I've always been very passionate about geography and the insights that it gives us about the world. And as an undergraduate, I was particularly interested in the relationships between people and the environment. When I first graduated, I knew I wanted to do a research degree, but I also wanted to get some experience, and I do have quite wide interests. So I thought that was a good opportunity to go and try a few different things before I returned to my master's and PhD. So I took 2 years out. I did an internship for the UN Environment Programme. I worked on a conservation project in Indonesia, and I had a stint in the civil service in the UK government as well. And I think they were all really good complementary experiences before returning to study. Then I did a PhD looking at the gendered nature of vulnerability to climate change with fieldwork in South Africa. And I actually first got into international development whilst a PhD student because I was a research assistant to one of my lecturers who was working on an applied development program, an FCDO funded program actually called the Regional Hunger and Vulnerability Program. And then after I graduated, I worked as a consultant on that program alongside undertaking a postdoctoral research position. Then I continued doing individual consulting, again, indulging my varied interests and using geography in pretty much everything that I did. I worked with NGOs, with governments, for UN agencies and multilateral development banks, and with donors and various development partners. And now I was just counting up this morning, I've had the privilege to work in 27 different countries, 23 of which are in Africa. And alongside my development work, I do remain interested in applied research, and I keep a finger in an academic pie with various visiting positions, which gives me an opportunity to keep in touch with the next generation and get to meet lots of young, keen, enthusiastic students. So yeah, that's kind of where I find myself today.
Thanks very much. And as you can see, our panelists have a very wide range of experience across sort of different organisations with different functions and specialisms in international development, and a lot of roots in as well. I was just wondering if you could sort of also talk about a kind of day in a life, really, sort of what your current role involves on a day-to-day basis, just in case students perhaps don't have a sense of the specifics of what a role might involve.
Yes, I'll jump in first. So I think it may sound really cliched, but I think one of the main things is that every day is different. And I think that for me is really, really fantastic, because it means there's such a diversity in people that you're speaking to, the areas of work that you're kind of focusing on. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I'd say actually it was very similar when I was at the Red Cross and in other roles as well. It's just fantastic speaking with so many colleagues who are so insightful, absolute experts in their fields, and you just want to soak up, all of that knowledge, and making those connections is key. So in my current role, as I mentioned, it's looking after all the kind of fundraising and communications, but because we're such a small organisation, it's also fantastic to have opportunities to get very involved in programmes. I went out to Malawi and did lots of stuff on the ground, and so it's that kind of diversity that I love. So at the moment I'm writing the impact report for last year, and it was such a challenging year, which I'm sure John and Catherine will also comment on, but we're so thrilled that actually we were able to do so much work in the context, because we're a water and sanitation charity. We had so much expertise, which was so crucial in the fight against the spread of COVID. So we were able to restore water access and work with preschools, make sure farmers had access to irrigation, that communities had water for hand washing, and teaching social distancing. And so it's brilliant to just be involved in that. And then some days I'll be speaking to a major donor, or later on I've got a call with a corporate partner over in America. So it's interesting with the time zones. That's another thing. You can have very early calls and very late calls, but it's just brilliant. So I hope that answers the question. It's just a huge, diverse range of things, which I really, really enjoy.
Thanks. It's very helpful to sort of understand the activities behind sort of your area of work and WASH and the activities of your charity. Thank you. Who wants to go next? Catherine, perhaps? Or?
Sure. I was just thinking what I did this morning because, yeah, as Cara said, I think most days are different, and I do have the opportunity to do lots of different things. Today, I haven't yet done anything especially exciting, but I'll give you an insight into what I have done in case it's of interest. I'm also working on a project in Malawi at the moment on building resilience and adapting to climate change, and it's being implemented by a variety of NGOs. I believe Pompeid is included in that process. And we've been thinking about how we can draw upon the learning of different implementing partners to better inform future programming, and also to inform kind of international conceptual and methodological debates around how we address adaptation and resilience. So one of the things I've been doing this morning was thinking about that. I'm also working on another project that's looking to build resilience to climate change of the health sector in Ghana. So we've been preparing a workshop where we'll be bringing together lots of different stakeholders who are interested in this, and we're designing a training needs assessment basically so that we can proceed with building capacity of the sector to deal with the risks that climate poses to the sector's development. Just one thing, okay, it wasn't today, but I'm pretty proud of it, so I'm going to mention it anyway. Last week, I had the opportunity to facilitate a national consultative youth forum on climate change in Malawi, which was attended by the Malawi Minister for Natural Resources and Forestry. And again, Cara mentioned, of course, the last year has challenged all of us and made us think creatively about how we do what we do. And I think before 2020, I never would have anticipated we'd be able to do something like that in a country which has amongst the highest internet connectivity costs in the world. But actually, we found a way. It worked out pretty well. And the advantage of doing that online was that we were able to have 18 of the country's 28 districts represented. And the likelihood of us being able to afford to do that face to face is pretty slim. So yeah, I think what we're experiencing at the moment is making us think about how we do development, and I'm fairly sure we're going to come out the other side of the pandemic with lots of good new innovations that we can continue to capitalize upon.
Sounds like, yeah, COVID has presented challenges but also opportunities. I was also struck by what you were talking about, sort of working with multiple stakeholders and sort of coalition building. So yeah, thank you for that. John, do you want to go next?
Yes, and firstly, I'll apologise for my internet isn't quite coping with the demands of Zoom today. Gosh, a day in my generally. Well, I mean, at the moment, I'm so I will. You can imagine what that's like. It's a thrill. But normally, with work, days can be really very different depending on what's going on. So the bit of the department that I've worked in has mainly been in the humanitarian or crisis response team. So on a day-to-day basis, we would be looking around the world to see what emergencies were unfolding, providing information and assessment to other people and other groups, whether they're country teams or to ministers, to say, hey, this country is looking a bit worrying, here's the information, these are the kinds of things you might want to do about it. And then on the day we might, just responded to some, tsunami and earthquake in Indonesia, some hurricanes in the Caribbean, Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas last year. And at those times, we'll work across all of government. So I would be helping to send kind of UK Navy ships and supplies to different places, and kind of coordinating as a diplomat with other host nations we find ourselves in. So yeah, lots and lots of variety. And one of the amazing things I found about the kind of day-to-day in the civil service, the best thing is the people we get to work. I might just jump and kind of do a couple of the questions. So do jobs tend to be clustered in London, or are there opportunities elsewhere? So in our department, we have a few locations in the UK, from London to East Kilbride and Manchester. But obviously the UK government has posts and missions in pretty much every country in the world, and quite a lot of those have a development focus. So there's loads of options like that. And then the other question I'll jump in and answer, is a master's degree essential or desirable? In some bits of the sector, yes. In my bit to the sector where we are in a kind of a donor government that gives money to development, it's not essential. And certainly as a hiring manager myself, it's not, to be honest, I look for or expect, kind of put as a key criteria. And I find other people are similar. That's in government.
Thanks, John. That's really helpful, and it's yeah, it's interesting. Good to hear that you all find that working with your colleagues in the same area is a big and sort of important part of the job. Real broad mix of sort of information sharing and field work and more. I was wondering if we could now sort of talk about advice you have, sort of specifically for students who might be thinking of starting a career in international development, how they could begin their career, get into the sector, opportunities in your area of work, the sorts of skills as well geographers can take from their degrees and apply in international development that might sort of help get an employer's attention. So we start with Catherine this time. Sorry, I've changed it a bit.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one thing to say is you might not know what it is that you want to do, because I remember certainly when I was a student, I really wasn't aware of all the opportunities that that existed out there. And I think, that's okay. Part of the no one expects anyone to have kind of a single career trajectory anymore. And, we all have the opportunity to embrace doing lots of things. And, the three of us have all done several things before and worked in different types of organizations before where we are now. So I think, that's worth bearing in mind. On the masters, I just wanted to add on that, because I remember it's brought up a memory I had when I did I should add an unpaid internship with you in environment program after graduating. I was devastated after that when I found out that not having a master's at that point in my career meant that I wouldn't be considered for any UN jobs. And I found people to be a little kind of closed-minded about about that, as kind of, we're not even going to consider anyone beyond that. I think I would say the competition within the sector is such that if you do have a master's, you probably compete better because a lot of other people will have masters. But I do think there are lots of jobs that don't necessarily require a master's to do. And don't let that dissuade you, because it's very easy to pick up relevant experience, kind of working your way through different things to get the skills and knowledge that you would be able to obtain through a master's anyway. So just wanted to add on that, on what John had said, because it really struck a chord with me, and I remember how I felt hearing that as a 21-year-old.
Yeah, thanks. Cara, do you want to talk about sort of career advice next?
Yeah, of course. So just to continue the kind of master's conversation, so I think what I'd add to that is that for me, I think when I finished my undergraduate, I knew that I wanted to continue my studies. So it was a very, natural kind of next step. So clearly, you can gain the knowledge. But I would say, exactly as Catherine's mentioned, I think sometimes there can be that idea that you must have one in order to, have a career in international development. And that's, an essential. And in certain cases, yes, it does help. You'll have those kind of skills. But exactly as Catherine and John have said, there's lots of other ways in which you can gain those too. And I would really encourage students to think about, if they are considering a master's, think of the kind of time and resource commitment as well. And another thing I'd say is lots of people will do, further study later on. So you don't have to do it, straight after, other studies. It can be something that you return to if you'd like to, keep it as an option. So I think hopefully that helps as well. I know it's a big, debate, and I mentor, various students, and it does come up time and time again. So you're not alone if you're, worrying about do I do a master's, do I not? So just to add a few other, I suppose, advice things is, as we mentioned, I think when you speak to anyone in the sector, it's just amazing the variety of routes that people have taken. And I think that really indicates that you can have all sorts of skills. You can have taken a very academic approach, a very operational one. You might have skills from another sector and want to transfer them. That's the fantastic thing about geography, of course, is that, you know, it applies to everything because it's the understanding of the world, the interrelation between people and place. And so it's, you know, just a fantastic subject. But all other subjects will also have very relevant skills. And by doing a degree or having done jobs, there will be so many skills that you can apply to other things. So I'd also really encourage you to do, I know I found it really helpful, do a kind of mapping exercise. So you can do concentric circles, and that can be the skills that you have. And that's everything from communication to teamwork to being able to research, analyze, you know, debates really articulately, and to be able to concisely, you know, present that to somebody else is a huge skill. So I think, you know, write all of those down, write your areas of interest and also all of your networks. I think that's another really key piece of advice for the sector, is think about all your networks, your connections, and make the most of those, whether that's family, friends, employers, professors, everyone you know on LinkedIn, and you will be amazed at the amount of people you already know. So if you're sat there thinking, I really want to go into international development, but I don't really know how to, I think that's a really good place to start. And then in terms of finding, sorry if I'm speaking for too long, but in terms of then finding opportunities, there's places like Bond, charity jobs, those sorts of websites, environment jobs, that might be a good place to start in terms of just seeing what sorts of things are out there. And you know, the sector is so diverse. So yeah, I just encourage you to go for it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks. That's really helpful comments. John, you're a hiring manager, and also any quirks in the sort of civil service applications and that route in that people should be aware of?
I think those that mirror Catherine and Cara really, and what they've said so far, and I think, you know, hopefully the three of us were selected to talk to you today for the reason that, you know, we've had quite varying jobs before we've come to do what we do. And I think that's the key, is what probably unifies us all, is we're passionate about serving the world's poor and seeing those less fortunate than us, you know, have more kind of choice and agency and can do more with their lives than otherwise background. And you know, I'm a tall white male whose parents paid for his master's degree, so that's one of the reasons why, as a hiring manager, I try and tend to look past it. I know that we, especially from the UK, are quite privileged often, and even groups within the UK are more privileged, and certainly my wife has to work 3 times as hard as me to be at the same, you know, kind of level as me in my career. Anyway, so advice in terms of international development bit and the civil service. So the great thing about the civil service is that there's so much of the UK and the UK government that is focused on working overseas. Just taking COVID as an example at the moment, we know that in the UK we can't be fully safe until people around the world are vaccinated. So the UK's put in £500 million into the COVAX, the kind of global vaccination facility for COVID. So some of my friends and colleagues have been, you know, working on that quite closely. And the brilliant thing about the civil service is there's lots of routes in. So I came in a bit later, as having worked at an NGO and done a PhD. I actually took a demotion and quite a big pay cut to come in, because it's quite hard sometimes from outside the civil service once you're a bit older to get in. But you just, you know, if you pick your path, you can go in and then work your way around. And others come in as apprentices, so probably doesn't apply to you guys because you're all doing degrees, but there are lots of routes like that. There's also the civil service fast stream, which I think is probably applications are closed this year, but they'll be open again come the end of the year. So many routes in. Into my department specifically, into FCDO, it can seem from the outside a little bit more closed. There's 1 or 2 routes in, but all you need to do basically is get a job in government and slowly work your way across. And, you know, one of the fantastic things about the civil service is, you know, sort of never more than 3 moves away from the job that you want. And it really is a fantastic place to work, because it's as close as you can in some ways to being a meritocracy. So if you do really well in your job and you perform well and you work well with others, and as you grow in leadership, then you can apply for jobs, and you can get jobs at a level of seniority which you get nowhere near working just straight through NGOs. So I'm 34 now, and I regularly talk with directors of large international organisations who are much older than me, because I think outside of the civil service there's a bit more time served. Inside there's a bit more kind of skills and merit, and so yes, I'd really encourage people to do that. I want to kind of just jump on one of the questions which came up about decolonising international aid. I think we've all talked a little bit about privilege. The UK and where we all come from has, in fact, RGS has long histories, with the rest of the world. And as the UK changes its relationship with people, and particularly in international development, and we stop seeing people as beneficiaries or recipients of aid, but more as partners in the change that we all collectively want to see around the world, that's kind of one of the big challenges. And yes, there are some big things that the UK needs to wrestle with, but I think that with the kind of openness, transparency, and goodwill, and kind of putting the poor first, you can really make a lot of progress. I don't think there's nothing to be embarrassed about being from the UK, but we know that we need to keep making big efforts to address power imbalances wherever we see them.
Thanks, John. I think that's a really important point, of course. So thank you for addressing that, and thank you all for your questions as well. They've been coming in, and grateful to the panel for picking some of those up. Some people have been asking about the sort of international development being international, involving a lot of travel and perhaps long-term assignments, and obviously you've all worked internationally, or even been based internationally. Do you have any sort of advice or thoughts on the kind of the drawbacks and benefits of working away from home, or in potentially difficult or sort of hazardous situations? And anyone would like to jump in on that? If you feel free.
I can have a go, because as a Brit, I left the UK to do my PhD fieldwork in South Africa 16 years ago now, and I've lived in South Africa ever since, partly because it's convenient, because I'm mainly working in Southern Africa, and the opportunity to be in the region I'm working in, is a great experience. I appreciate that's different to some people who want to work overseas for a set period of time, but always intend to come home again. And of course, we do encounter lots of people in those positions. My impression is that those types of positions are very competitive, because, of course, if you do work in development, you are likely to want to spend in the countries that you're focusing on at some point. But similarly, I also work with many people who are based in the UK, the US, Australia, and various countries around the world who are also working remotely now in locations other than their own. And I can link that back to a question about travel opportunities. I would say up until the start of the pandemic, I spent well over 50% of my time traveling. That's partly my choice, because I enjoy the opportunity to do that. And I would rather, when working with people in another country, I would rather be in that country to work with them, as opposed to working remotely. I do think the pandemic has shown us that we can achieve a lot of the same objectives remotely, and it's always sat somewhat uneasily with me working on climate change adaptation, that in order to do my job, I have to contribute to the problem of climate change with high carbon emissions. So I'm definitely hoping that I won't need to travel as much in the future. So I think that will depend on position, but I think the opportunity to travel and the opportunity to spend prolonged periods of time in other countries is one of the big draw factors that brings lots of us to development careers in the first place.
Yeah, and anyone else that does sort of talk about their international work in that sense, or Cara, perhaps?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that Catherine said, and I think something that also speaks to one of John's comments earlier is also the importance of remembering, dependent on the role, the importance of local people doing, the roles, and I think it's really, really crucial. And I know for us that our Malawi teams are absolutely fantastic, and everyone is from Malawi. And it's that the benefit to obviously them and the skills, the income for them, and the impact on the local economy, families, etc. But then there are the other roles that then it's fantastic to get other expertise in, and the advice, etc. So it's just striking that balance, I think. But as Catherine said there, and John, there's lots and lots of opportunities out there, as John mentioned, with FCDO, for instance. Lots and lots of positions. The same when I was at the Red Cross, so the Federation, which is the kind of umbrella for all the national societies. People can go on secondments to Geneva, they can be a delegate, and then also in very specialist roles too. So someone can be a cash delegate, for instance, or they can work specifically on food security and basically go to different countries worldwide with their skills. And again, working with communities and helping to kind of upskill and help solve some of the issues. So I think there are lots of opportunities out there. So it's just keeping your eyes peeled for all of those, and again using networks and connections, and signing up to things like job alerts. Definitely another thing I'd add as well in terms of kind of advice is a plug for the RGS, really. So I'd say membership is fantastic if you're considering that. I'm a fellow, and that's amazing as well, and there's so many opportunities to get involved in things. There's also the magazine, fantastic lectures, so you can develop so much knowledge even from doing that on top of studies. If you're particularly interested in something like food security, then read the books on it, read the articles, keep up to date on the latest trends. And that's the kind of thing, John will be able to comment as a kind of hiring manager as well, but that's the kind of thing that really shows in something like an interview. If you know exactly what's happening in the particular country that you'd be working in, then it's very clear in the conversations that you're having, and that comes through in your passion. So definitely stay on top of all the things that are going on, really.
Thank you for mentioning the RGS. And as John, do you have anything sort of to add to that in terms of but both from the networking end of things, and also working in partnership and locally, and perhaps a few people have actually mentioned language skills, sort of how important that to developing your career in international development, sort of probably more than other sectors, perhaps.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to echo a little bit what the others said, I remember when I started off my career being really anxious about being able to travel and wanting to travel and wanting to go here and there and wanting to be the person that, was picked to go on the trip or to go and do something. With hindsight and a bit of wisdom, I see that, if you keep being passionate in this, there's so much ability to travel and be around and go places. There's a wonderful move in the sector to, make things more local. But we're still from the UK. There's still a lot of money that goes into development from the UK, and there still are UK interests. So there's still travel to be done. That obviously is a huge privilege, and it can be challenging. And I think one of the questions was around, relationships with kind of international development or in the civil service and your family relationships. I think this is up to you, really. Some people choose to prioritize certain things. I have friends who have really wanted to work, in the middle of South Sudan, in feeding centers for a long time. And, obviously family kind of relationships are more challenging there. There's a balance. I've got other colleagues who just haven't really wanted to go overseas because it hasn't quite worked for them, but they go on shorter trips and they still lead promising careers in international development. There is a big bias in the sector for, unless you've been, I think I once had a boss say to me, unless you've been sat in a tent being bitten by mosquitoes with RPGs going off over your head, then you can't get enough experience to be promoted. It turns out his sort of views were a bit old and outdated, and we talk about diversity. Those kind of things are generally easier for men to do. Things are changing, but they're changing slowly. To answer that diversity question, we're a long way, I think, everyone behind where we really should be by now. There's an awful lot of people with very good intentions. There's big, slow-moving organizations that are slowly changing. But things are getting better. And I think the main challenges still for diversity are just people not trying. I'm far more likely to be contacted and emailed by someone about careers advice or internships by someone who's like me. And that's just unfortunately the fact. So if you're not like me, which I hope you're not, please do consider reaching out to people, whoever they are, because this, your network is so important. It's not because it's kind of jobs for the boys and who you know means you'll get a job, but it's much deeper than that. It really, if you have a network of people who are working on this, it really shows that you're passionate, you're connected, and I think at this time in the world where there aren't that many face-to-face opportunities, all the more reason to branch out and start your network. I found in the past Twitter to be really helpful. I know kind of joining in with events like this or attending other things, super important. But speak to as many people as you can about this, because there are so many different routes. And not all of them start with unpaid internships like Catherine had to do. That would be my encouragement to you. You especially as a geographer, you have an awful lot of skills and you deserve to be paid for what you do. So do keep looking for that.
Yeah, so perhaps on sort of, and perhaps summarising the careers advice, on the one hand, and a lot of you mentioned networking and building your own network, and as Cara said, sort of using the contacts you have. Catherine, as well, you mentioned sort of how it can be very competitive and difficult and unpaid potentially to get a start in a large organisation. So perhaps seeing those as sort of two contrasting approaches, do you sort of have any kind of just sort of advice for students who want to go one way or the other and say, this is how you can get your foot in the door at a big organisation, and if not, this is how you can sort of build your network? I know you've obviously mentioned a few of these things already. Sorry, Catherine, I think, do you want to go first?
Yes, sure. I was just thinking when John said, Twitter has been quite useful. I think we follow each other on Twitter, John, even though we've never met before today. So that's a good example of how, technology flattens hierarchies a lot. And I think Cara mentioned LinkedIn as well. And I would definitely say cultivate a good LinkedIn profile. I regularly get contacted for consulting assignments by people I don't know through LinkedIn. So I think a lot of organizations use LinkedIn actively to search for new talent. So make sure that you're present there. And yeah, take advantage of the fact that, I remember as an A-level student reading reports. I was particularly interested in coral reefs. And I remember sending a letter to someone who worked at the World Bank who'd written a report, faithfully hoping that she would respond to me. And of course she didn't. She probably never got the letter. It was probably intercepted by, 3 layers of secretaries or goodness knows what. But of course, in today's day and age, everyone has an email address. It's pretty easy to find out what that person's email address is. So you don't have to deal with those kind of barriers that we had in the older days. So depending on what you're interested in, I think, Cara's already mentioned about kind of mapping out the landscape and trying to find out what the opportunities are. I would say be brave and be bold, contact people. Only by getting in touch with people can you portray your enthusiasm, and that enthusiasm will be remembered. I can certainly tell when people get in contact with me, what they're really passionate about, or, if they're kind of going through the motions and I'm the 50th email that they've sent and they've kind of running out of enthusiasm, and that really does come across and that will be remembered. And lots of people want to hear from you, want to tap into your passion and enthusiasm. So I would say be bold and courageous and use the tools that you have that are available. And just to add also on the networking, I remember also thinking, networking, what networks am I tapped into? I mean, if nothing else, all of you are in an institution now which has had lots of graduates proceed before you, a lot of whom will be in the types of careers that you will want to be in the future. And I think increasingly universities are recognizing that they need to play an active role in kind of supporting career development beyond just transmitting knowledge at university stage. So find out what did your dissertation supervisor, what do their previous students do now? Where are they working now? Can they put you in touch? Even if it doesn't necessarily have to lead to a job offer, but it leads to you better understanding the opportunities that are out there, and that will help you to better market yourself, so that the right doors will open. So I think there's lots of opportunities there, and I would just encourage you to go for it.
Yeah, I'd just add to that, so there's the network, which is the kind of the broad bit. I'd also consider, find yourself a, professional mentor as you start your kind of professional time of life. They could be someone that's in the kind of the job you dream that you would have, or they could be someone slightly disconnected. But there's a lot of people at our kind of level who do mentoring, who are really keen to help people and give advice to others. And I certainly had a few in different areas. Where I'd send them job applications, I'd ask them about jobs, I'd ask them, there's this impenetrable looking job at this organization, who is it that you need to contact to speak to find out more about it. So I'd really encourage you to go a little bit deeper. And again, coming back to that kind of point of, like, it's about enthusiasm. If you really, really want to work in this area, you do really need to want to work in this area. For some people, it just happens. But it's quite rare. You need to make a lot of deliberate, bold choices. It might not be an obvious straight line, but that doesn't matter, because I think the skills that you pick up along the way, especially as a geographer, where you really understand both the people bit and the kind of the natural world, you've got everything going for you to make a big impact in this area.
Yeah, if I may just add to that, so completely agree with everything that's been said. I think definitely LinkedIn is such a kind of key tool, and I'd really also encourage you to make those speculative applications. So I remember years ago, I was always particularly interested in the relationship between poverty and development, but particularly food insecurity. So I found the email address of the head of the UK delegation for the World Food Programme and sent an email saying, I love this stuff so much. Is there anything coming up, etc. And I got a response, and I think because of that, the kind of passion, hopefully it wasn't just that he was like, oh goodness, so I'll just quickly respond, but I think he responded to it, and there wasn't anything at the time, but I think it just shows that often there is nothing to lose. And I know from my perspective that it's really lovely when people get in touch and say, could you, do you have 5 minutes just to chat through this, or is there anything coming up? And often people are absolutely delighted, and feel quite, humbled to have been asked to, help with something, provide some advice. And I think, as John was saying, just remember how many skills you have and what you can bring to an organisation. So yes, it's fantastic when you get that role, but feel empowered enough to know that actually they'd also be very lucky to have you, doing the role. And so when you send these applications, know you have the passion, you have the skills, and so, just absolutely go for it. And I think also linking into what Catherine said about, it is very clear when emails have just been sent, en masse to say 100 different people, and sometimes the name of an organization isn't changed, so you literally know where it's been sent before. So I think I'd really encourage you also with things like cover letters, is take the time and make them tailored to a particular role, because then when you're reading it, it will just flow a lot better from the perspective of the person reading it, and it might just be little things like adding in a keyword that relates to the particular role, or if they have a specification list, look at it really clearly and make sure that you provide examples of when you've shown good teamwork, or something that's in the list, and I think that stands you in much better stead. I know particularly at the Red Cross, things like that are really important, so the specification, use the keywords because they are picked out and looked at. So yeah,
thank you very much. Yeah, I was just wondering if we could sorry, on the topic of networking as well, if you're watching, you can check out our Development Geographies research group online. That may have sort of useful information and contacts, especially if you're looking at sort of masters or further study. On the topic of study, sorry, I realise we're getting towards the end, but are there things geographers, students watching, could do now in, say, either their second year, their dissertation, what they're doing at university, or similar to sort of build experience and demonstrate, as you've all sort of put emphasis on, that enthusiasm?
I mean, yeah, so many things. Make sure that your dissertation is something you're interested in and relevant. Don't be afraid to write out to NGOs or to others to say, hey, could I collaborate with you? Do you have any field data that I could look at? Are there any kind of kind of key issues you would like a 1 or 2 page report on. I'm a huge fan of 2 pages. I think that's about the amount of information I can digest. And certainly when we're working with ministers who are so busy, you know, half a page is what they can do. So, you know, really concentrate on not just the long dissertations, but the kind of the shorter briefing skills. And just on the kind of reaching out, I'm sure if any of you contact RGS, I'm certainly happy for them to give my email out to you guys if you want to get in touch. And I'm sure the others would be. I've now peer pressured them into it, even if they weren't going to say yes. But yes, so just, you know, make it relevant, make it something you're interested in, and, you know, don't stop trying, even if the first kind of thing that you go for isn't quite, doesn't come off.
Can I just add to that? I'm glad you brought up the idea of the dissertation, because I think that, you know, that's a great opportunity that we have as geographers to be able to conduct our own piece of research. You know, we can choose to do it on absolutely anything that's of interest to us. And of course, if you do have one eye on your future career when you're deciding what to do your dissertation on, then, you know, that can really stand you in good stead, you know, for future employers to see, you know, what you've looked at. Something else which I would say is important as someone who has kind of one foot in applied research and one foot in development consulting. There is often a need for good analytical skills to be applied to projects. I know a lot of the projects that I work on, we often think, oh, wouldn't it be great if we had a dissertation student who could really get their teeth into this particular thing? Because often in the process of implementation, people don't have the time available to really do that. So the opportunity of a dissertation is a good way to reach out to organizations and say, look, I'm interested in this, you know, yeah, is there anything I can do that would be of use to what you're doing in your programming at the moment? And that would also obviously help to expose you to them and vice versa. And, you know, you can take that opportunity to see if that's a career that you want to continue in, and they get exposure to you and your enthusiasm, and, you know, then your name will be at the forefront of their minds if they're doing hiring in the future. So I definitely think that the dissertation that we get to do as geographers is a huge opportunity in this regard.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think the dissertation is a, you know, really crucial time in which, if you have areas that you're really interested in, that's the opportunity to, you know, be able to delve into it and write, you know, a new piece. And the fact that you're also finding basically a gap in whether it's research or, you know, something very practical is really exciting, because it means that your piece of work could then go on to be used, you know, cited in other people's dissertations, or, you know, and whatever it might be. And I'd really encourage you to use university resources as well. So so for instance, at Manchester, they have the GDI, there's a whole, you know, research consortium around it that you can sign up to. There's all the debates. Lots of them will also have online resources in terms of how to, you know, it will break it down in terms of how to make contact with people. It might have lists of, you know, different organizations to make connections with. So it's definitely worth seeing what, you know, your university has, and whilst you're there, you know, making the most of all of those resources. Also speaking to your supervisors. So for instance, your dissertation supervisor will be someone who is an expert in, you know, that field that you are writing in, and so they will have so much knowledge, and you can ask them, you know, what would you encourage me to do in terms of you know, I really want to specialize in this, so have you got any advice? How did you get there? You know, and kind of absorb all of that knowledge as well. So I think definitely see, you know, what your university has, and if you're not sure, if there's a person that you can ask, then I'd really encourage you to do that.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all your really helpful comments. It's been really interesting to listen to your experiences and advice. I think we're almost up in terms of time. Perhaps we just go around with maybe one last message, or maybe one action that you'd sort of recommend to students or someone starting out right now. I think that would probably finish off, I think. Sorry, let's go first. Cara, do you want to go first?
Oh, sorry, John, do you want to go first? Oh, thank you. So, well, firstly, fantastic that you're interested in international development in the sector, and it's really rewarding. It's a fantastic sector to be in. So, you know, definitely just go for it. I think one of my main things I'd really suggest is that mapping exercise, and it's so useful. So if you write all of that, your skills, areas of interest, the people that you know, and basically keep adding to it as you continue through your career and, you know, expand those networks. And I've certainly found that useful on quite a number of occasions, and I've advised lots of people to do it, and, you know, in all different sectors, they find it really useful. So I think that would be the big nugget of, yeah, kind of advice.
Hi, my time is slightly up, so I've been joined by an extra visitor. And my advice to you would be really, you know, keep going, doing what you want to do. Have a long-term view of where you want to get to, which is working in this sector, and then be quite flexible about what jobs you're going to do to get there and what you're willing to do, and just keep learning skills as you go. And if you can get through this year of, or these last kind of couple of years of learning during COVID, then you can probably do anything. If you can tolerate all these online Zooms and then still want to go to work, then bravo to you. So do keep going, and a real privilege to speak to you all today. Thank you.
John, you've said exactly what I was going to say. I think the two kind of key words that I had in mind there were enthusiasm and flexibility. I think, you know, rather than getting too caught up in wanting to do one thing, I think if you're clear about what your values are and how you want to apply those values in the world, then the opportunities that arise will enable you to do that, and the process will take you to where you want to go. So I think follow your heart, your passion, and what you're enthusiastic about, and be flexible with the process. I'm sure you know, none of us probably predicted that we would be where we are now when we were at the stage that you're all at, but we've all had, you know, a great career trajectory to get here, and I'm sure the same will be the case for you too. So good luck.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all very much for your time and your expertise and your really insightful comments. Thank you everyone who attended. We'll send you an email with a careers resource, other resources we have for careers, ideas, explore and develop your careers. More webinars coming up next Wednesday on finance management and sustainability consulting, with more to follow through March. Leave us some feedback. We'll send the link around for the feedback form. And I think all that remains is to say thank you very much to John Stone, Cara Treasure and Catherine Vincent, and thank you all for watching.